Control's been out for over a month now, and yeah, this is my review. If it was any other game that dropped this year, I probably would have just dropped the review, but I have quite a lot to say about this game, and I've had quite a lot of people ask me about what I think about the game since I've played it. I beat the game roughly 4 weeks ago, but this video sadly fell on the side since I started college around that time, and as well as work. But let's talk about the weirdest game of 2019. As of the last decade, whenever you thought of Remedy, I'm pretty sure there would be two words that immediately came to your mind. Linear and story. Control actually breaks this tradition, which is probably the Finish's team most ambitious game yet. Before going in on Control, it's important that you know where I'm coming from. I previously played both Alan Wake and its DLC American Nightmare in preparation for Control. While I enjoyed both of them, I always thought that Remedy games just weren't that really fun and engaging to play. It always seemed like there was something missing about them. They were games that were good at best, but nothing to write home about. Control is also weird in this way too. While I enjoyed the game a lot more than I did with Alan Wake, it still falls short in many ways. So, let's break down the good, the bad, and well, just the overall weird. Now, even though it's been over a month now and I so desperately want to talk about certain aspects of the game's story that made me go ugh, I'll hold myself back and try to do my best without diving into spoilers. I didn't follow the game that closely in terms of gameplay and new trailers that they released before launch, so the main premise I pretty much knew going in was that you play as Jesse as you make your way through the oldest house. So that's what I'll tell you here. Sam Lake once again returned to write Control, having previously worked on Alan Wake and Max Payne's stories before being executive producer on Quantum Break. Now, stories can be told multiple ways, either directly through the game's mandatory cutscenes or through collectibles and clues intentionally placed around the map. Control balances this pretty well. Having over 250 collectibles, there is a lot of information to be found through the documents you find, and I found myself reading a lot of them more than most games, despite the quantity of them in this game. They are definitely worth going over and will give you interesting details the cutscenes just won't give you. These interactions do go beyond just picking up documents and reading them though, as you often find video recording and skits as well. What disappoints me however is just how it all came together and finished. So much detail went into these collectibles and the overall world development, but it didn't quite finish its feet in terms of the story. Like Alan Wake before it felt really rushed and unsatisfying. It's so frustrating to see the amount of quality that this team went into making the world so rich of tidbits and lore, I guess, but in this case they didn't really give any of that attention to the story, or at least the ending for that case. A big part about investment in games stem from characters. It's one of the most pivotal parts to a game. You want to play as someone you root for or can relate to. Sadly, Control is filled with so many mediocre characters that I just had to make this literally its own section. Starting with the protagonist herself, Jessie. I never really cared for Jessie. The actress from what I could tell is pretty good, but besides that, it's thrown out the window and everything she says feels like it's robotic or something. Like I swear, Jessie just has two faces throughout the game and it's almost impossible to tell what she's feeling. It's kind of sad that the only character I felt really understood or well knew to a certain extent was the doctor that you see through dozens of projectors through the old house. There's a few other interesting characters like the janitor for instance, but other than that it feels like they're kind of one-layered. Everyone else just feels really bland and is something that disappointed me, especially coming after Alan Wake. The strongest thing Control has going for it has to be its environments and the sense of freedom it gives the player. It's not entirely open from the get-go, as unlocking new areas is often through linear progression, but the freedom of going back into old areas looking for secrets after discovering new abilities is super satisfying and gives a reason to explore these vast array of environments found only within this old house. I dreaded that a game set entirely in one place would get really old really fast, but given the nature of this ever-evolving place, I never knew it would be next. I hate comparing games when reviewing them, but in this case it's hard not to draw similarities to Arkham Asylum when talking about Control. I immediately found myself feeling like I was back in 2008 exploring Arkham Asylum again, due to them both sharing the in-between of open environments and linear progression. While the world is clearly the highlight for me, I can't help but feel that a little bit of variety wouldn't have hurt at all. It's hard to remain excited when faced with these new facilities when most of them are fairly samey and uninspiring in some areas. The few areas in the game that do are awesome, but very far in view between. In the end though, the sense of freedom Control gives to the player is hands down one of the aspects of the game I enjoy the most. As you make your way through Control, progression takes form in different ways. I don't want to spoil what activities give you what, but exploring is always a good idea. You'll upgrade Jesse through new abilities, a skill tree, gun forms, and mods. Mods can be applied to both your guns and Jesse, and can be compared to something like perks for instance. They do make a substantial difference, but due to them being found in almost every other room and the decision for you to only be able to carry around 24 at a time, left me more annoyed than excited whenever I'd find new mods. I didn't enjoy the mod system that much. It kind of felt like it was just there to emphasize that, oh, this game isn't a linear story game, but has depth in its gameplay too. Luckily though, the other forms of progression are pretty great. Abilities drastically change how you play and what you're capable of. Gun forms are a unique way of giving the player different guns without needing to drop and pick up themselves, and the skill tree is very much that of what you'd expect. Yes, Control has side quests and they're pretty good. Like the environments and collectibles mentioned before, it's obvious that the team spent a lot of time making these optional activities worth playing. Some of the game's best encounters and puzzles and boss fights are pretty much in these optional quests, and yeah, the rewards are also worth pursuing here as well. For those looking to only get the main story, however, you can do that just fine, and the optional side quests will be waiting for you after the credits roll. My biggest gripe with Control lies with the fact that it tries to be a lot of different games at the same time and doesn't really stick to one, and in that case it doesn't feel natural. The game's checkpoint system is that of a Metroidvania, having specific control points spread across the map. This works well half the time, but when you run into the game's linear story moments, focused on the story, it can get quite frustrating when you have to sprint back to where you were in a mission. This incohesiveness also is found with the game's combat. For the most part, it feels very fun to play in Control. That being said, the health regeneration, or the lack of regeneration rather, is quite odd to me. Remedy instead went for a health system that banks off killing enemies and gathering health shards. This was implemented to be more strategic and not for the player to just run around aimlessly is my guess, but the problem here is that game's many moves and abilities favor an aggressive playstyle, and when encountering some of the game's numerous bosses, it can be quite annoying not being able to heal because simply the game doesn't throw any enemies at you to collect the shards off of. It's really frustrating. Control might be the weirdest game I've played in 2019, in more ways than one. On one hand, it takes everything Remedy has produced yet and takes it up to 11, but on the other hand, it feels like something's missing or the whole experience just isn't as cohesive as it should be. This interesting and mysterious world is really held back by weird design choices. I just wish I could have felt invested in this game's world, but never felt that the game gave me a reason to. Going forward though, this game is getting some DLC expansions, so it'll be interesting to see how it evolves from there. It totally looks like the game's embracing the fact that Control and Alan Wake takes place in the same universe, which is pretty cool. Control was never really a game that had a content problem, so I'm totally fine with the future DLC drops if they're good. So yeah, for longtime fans of Remedy and even those looking for a game to lose a dozen or 2 hours exploring, I'd recommend Control. However, if you haven't been sold on the game by what you have seen, or rather this review, then I definitely would think twice. It's a fun single player game if you're in the mood for one, for sure, but just left me a lot to be desired. Thank you for watching my review on Control. As I said in the beginning of this video, I did not expect to be making this in October, but I definitely wanted to get my thoughts and opinions out there for you guys. For more reviews of mine, I will leave a link in the description below for a playlist of all my reviews previously I've done. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you haven't done so yet. With all that being said, I've been Online or Brandon, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a good rest of your day and take care.